Kithing, 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 kithing. Hello, and welcome to the Telltale Cake, where we tell tales about cake, and we try to ignore the corpses under the floorboards, and also the fact that I'm wearing a shrimp costume. With me today is my dear friend, Caroline.
Hello. I'm very happy to be here, especially because I get to witness this. I'm not sure how well it shows up on the camera, but incredible shrimp costume. I'm not sure if it's the eyes that are sticking out from the side or the lovely antennae, but it's a thing to behold.
I think I'm just going to keep this in my car and just in case of emergencies now.
Yeah, I mean, you can improve an emergency greatly by having someone in a shrimp costume. I think the best is if there's no explanation. Like, there's an emergency happening, and in the background, there is someone standing solemnly without speaking in a shrimp costume.
Perfect. Now, I received a comment on this channel recently describing it as the channel in which two people eventually get around to talking about a book that they both read.
Well, that's rude.
So I think we should keep talking about the shrimp costume for a while.
We probably should, just to aggravate them more.
Exactly.
It's an accurate comment, I will say.
It is.
But that's all right.
In fact, I think I might start using it to introduce the show.
There you go.
Two people eventually get around to talking about a book.
Yeah, eventually start. Yeah. But I mean, I feel like you do have to address the elephant or the shrimp in the room when there's something like this happening.
I feel like you should never address the elephant or the shrimp in the room.
That's a good point. We could have just done this whole thing without ever explaining why you're dressed up as a shrimp.
We still haven't.
That's true. We haven't. We'll get there eventually. We are doing Madeleine L'engle's A Wind in the Door.
We are. Now, we're going to talk about the book and the author more specifically. Madeleine L'engle is a person that, first of all, she actually got a degree from Smith in the 30s. So,
very impressive.
Yeah, that is not a time at which education is often available to women. And then this book was written as a sequel, or it says a companion. I'm not sure what the difference between a sequel and a companion book is.
I will say, I think that there are times where it feels as though the events in A Wrinkle in Time didn't even happen. So maybe it is more of a companion than a sequel.
That actually makes much more sense, frankly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I keep wondering why she's so surprised at Charles Wallace saying odd things.
Right, exactly. So it does feel in that way more like a companion piece. So this is a companion or a sequel to its more well-known A Wrinkle in Time, which has had a few different, I think, like a mini-series and a movie. I saw a bit of the movie, enough to know that it was going to make me sad and cry, so I stopped watching it. Fair. Did you see it?
I did not.
Okay.
When did it come out?
Not that long ago, but my sense of time is warped. Any time in the last 15 years could be described as not that long ago to me.
Was it before or after the pandemic?
I think it was before.
Okay,
I could be wrong, but I think it was before.
Basically ancient history.
Yeah,
now.
in the before times.
In the before times it came out.
Yeah.
And I didn't see it. I have read the book. It has what I think is probably the best explanation of dimensionality I've ever read, with the ant and the skirt.
It's a wonderful description, yeah. So this is kind of A Wind in the Door is where Madeleine L'engle does the magic school bus route of going into someone else's insides. Do you remember that Magic School Bus episode?
Yes.
It's one of my favorites.
I love it.
Incredible.
And I learned recently from a children's librarian that children still like Magic School Bus.
I am so happy to hear that. That's amazing.
Right?
It continues on.
I want to be Miss Frizzle one day.
Oh, we all aspire. I don't have the hair to be a real Miss Frizzle, but I could wear a wig.
And you could wear the dresses. The dresses are awesome. And the earrings.
Yes.
Love Mrs. Frizzle.
Ah, she's incredible. Anyway, I didn't mean to go off on too much of a tangent, but yes, Miss Frizzle, amazing. And this is the Magic School Bus version of a Madeleine L'engle book in which they do go into a person's body. Unlike the Magic School Bus, there are some literary fictional liberties taken, perhaps, with, what exactly is going on
inside the human
body. And it's a little more spiritual, perhaps, but we'll get there.
Miss Frizzle is not taking us on a magical journey where we all learn to love ourselves and everyone in the universe.
No, she's not. She's not battling the ecthroi, so.
She just wants us to know how the heart works.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, on this show, we eat cake with our books, and I made a biblically accurate angel cake. Now, I made this a week ago, and it looked much better a week ago. However, since then, I have had many issues with my car, so this recording was delayed. So, first of all, half the cake is gone, and the other half of the cake, the eyeballs have kind of been melting, because the eyeballs are basically nothing but plastic sugar.
Who doesn't love plastic sugar, though? Truly.
Honestly, I think it looks way more horrifying now.
It does look more horrifying, and I feel like Madeleine L'engle would approve because the description of the cherub is a bit, horrifying.
As it is in the Bible.
As it is in the Bible. And if you are up on your Bible, you will know that a biblically accurate cherub has many eyes and wings covering the eyes.
And there's a reason why they always introduce themselves with, "Be not afraid."
Exactly.
Because you should be very afraid. Now, I actually had a piece last night, and it was still fine.
Okay.
So
delightful.
So we'll hope there's really nothing that's going to go bad in a week in the refrigerator.
It's fine.
I am going to very carefully put this on the floor, and very carefully because, as we've just discovered, moving around without the head falling off on this thing is a little bit...
It's a little bit precarious, yeah. One does not simply don a shrimp costume.
I think this is the gay apparel that the song Deck the Halls talks about donning.
Okay, I can see that. I mean, it is a bit gay in both senses of the word. And you
really? I feel
a little bit. And you could call it apparel if you really stretch the definition of apparel.
I feel like most of the nice gay men I know would not be caught dead in something like this.
That's valid. That's valid. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't have the high taste value.
Or really any taste value.
Are looking for. I was going with the fact that it's a bit camp. But
I feel like it's not fabulous enough.
That's valid. And there's no glitter.
I can fix that.
Distinct lack of glitter. The cake is delightful. She made a gluten-free angel food cake for me because she's amazing. And, with the aforementioned eyeballs. Very nice.
It's actually easier to make an angel food cake gluten-free than a lot of cakes because these things are almost entirely egg white.
Right. So there's less flour to contend with. That makes sense.
Of course, it does take almost an entire carton of eggs in this economy.
We all applaud your commitment to the bit.
Thank you. Especially with the shrimp costume.
Mm-hmm. I was going to attempt to portray Mr. Jenkins in the book, and then I had kind of a wardrobe malfunction involving buttons and the fact that men's shirts do not really adequately allow for, my build. So we had to, scramble and do a take two.
I bet Mr. Jenkins sometimes has wardrobe malfunctions as well. And buttons are hard.
Buttons are hard, man. Sometimes they pop off and you don't want them to, so.
You do have a very, Star Trek The Next Generation sweater look going on.
That's true. That is true. And I feel like even though it's very different from Star Trek, in some ways thematically, there's very much still a sense of we're all in this together and love and blah, blah.
Love and peace.
Love and peace, yes.
That's a good segue. Let's actually talk about it. First, we need to judge it by its cover. Now, this is going to be easier because my cover has actually come off. This is a very old copy.
Old and well-loved copy.
Yes, this is portraying like a little boy, like a scary cherub, or rather a cherubim is how
That's
he
right.
likes to have himself called, and a schoolgirl looking confused.
Which is, I mean, pretty accurate.
Yeah.
I will say that in my reading of the book, although I guess the cherubim don't necessarily have gender, he seems like a male and is referred to with he him pronouns. So, and this seems a little bit more feminine than that, because illustrators always want to make angels to be women. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, even the male angels, when they're illustrated, they tend to look very,
Mm-hmm.
very femme, very
I
androgynous.
do want to bring attention to one other piece on this cover. If you see this shrimp-like creature, this is why our fearless leader has donned a shrimp costume, and we will get to the shrimp-like creature. Although it would pain him deeply to be called a shrimp-like creature.
So you can refer to me as a shrimp-like creature throughout, though.
I think I'm going to forever.
Good.
You're going to be the shrimp-like creature.
I accept
For
that.
years,
I
yes.
think I deserve it.
Indeed.
This cover art is by Jody Lee, who has also done a number of books that I read growing up by Mercedes Lackey.
Nice. So this is there were various covers done for these books. All the good ones are weird. So if the modern one now, which I read this as an ebook because I'm terrible, and I'd read it as a child many, many ages ago, but it was a library book. The library book I remember, which some of you from the 90s may also remember, was probably done around the same time as this one, but it was mostly kind of yellow-orange, and it did also feature the cherubim with the eyes, and it featured the girl, but this time she was in like a yellow cardigan kind of situation. So I don't think it had the shrimp-like creature.
It's
It's a
unfortunate.
nice little addition there. But the ones now do not look weird. They look like they could honestly be some adult novel, and it's sad because these are weird books.
They're very weird.
They're very weird. You should embrace the weirdness and have a weird cover. So I do approve of this cover for being weird.
The title is a reference to Le Morte d'Arthur, which I have not read, so I don't know how apropos it is. Nor did I look it up. I think I tried to read it once.
I read a tiny bit of it because when I was an English major, I decided to take the nerdiest class that's ever been conceived of, which was a review of Arthurian legend, because I was that kind of person, and I still am, I guess. And we didn't read all of Le Morte d'Arthur because it's very long, and it was written a million years ago, so it's very complicated. But I read enough of it to get the gist. And that's kind of the French take on the Arthurian legend. And it's the one where we get most of the ideas about the, Guinevere, Lancelot, all of that. Those were all French editions.
Of course they were.
Of course they
that
were.
sounds very French.
It sounds very French, yeah.
Now that you mention it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't remember what A Wind in the Door was referencing in Le Morte d'Arthur. And because I'm a hack, I also didn't look it up. But it is like we said, let's talk a little bit just about what universe this book is set in.
It is an alternate one. It seems to be a universe in which our Earth took some different historical paths.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the big plot points in this book is that mitochondria have been discovered, which in our world was done in like 1850.
Mm-hmm.
But here, well, we've seemed to be having it feels like very Cold War U.S.,
Mm-hmm.
New England U.S.
Mm-hmm.
However, we have walked on the moon a very long time ago, and also Mars.
Mm-hmm.
The president is referred to as L.A., which is not a president that we in the U.S. have ever had. And there's this interesting thing that you picked up on that happened, which...
Yeah, so, okay, so first of all, in terms of, like, when they walked on the moon, a doctor in the book said that it was when their own mother, and these are children, was too young to remember it. This book was published in what, 73?
Yes.
So obviously we're talking about a different timeline. But it does feel very Cold War. All of the books in this little cycle feel fairly Cold War U.S. It's obviously set in the U.S. There's a moment where they reference a Charlemagne battle, and I am blanking on the name of the Charlemagne battle.
It starts with an R.
Yes, it's the one that the Song of Roland was based on. So if you know your Song of Roland in French medieval literature, you're on the right path.
And who doesn't know that?
Who doesn't obviously know that? Seriously. So that was based on this battle. Now, in our universe, this battle was lost, and it was lost very completely. Like, they were completely routed. Charlemagne lost to the Moors. It was actually it's a little simplified, but we'll go with the simplified version. It was a battle that was in Spain, and the Song of Roland, commemorates the battle. Now, in this universe, Charlemagne won that battle for some reason. And it's important in the book that he won because, quote unquote, our history would have been darker than it already was. Now, I was very confused by this. So when I looked it up, I was like, okay, well, but he actually did lose the battle. So what historical change is she talking about? Because it was one that these children seem to already know about.
These children have such a great grasp of European history.
Seriously, I apparently do not, which I do not have a great grasp of European history before about, the 1400s. So this is well before that. We're talking pre-year 1000. So the Charlemagne was someone who more or less ushered in the end of, quote, the Dark Ages. I'm vastly simplifying everything. And so what she's saying, I guess, I don't know, because he still ushered in the end of the Dark Ages. The only big difference I can think of is that the Moors won the battle. And I really hope she's not making the racist argument that our history was worse because the Moors won. But I don't know.
I kind of feel like she is because she spends a lot of time talking about the violence of the inner cities, which you and I both think of as a dog whistle. And
it is.
We're also from what she, I think, would consider the inner city.
Oh, yes, because, Decatur, Georgia, a real dangerous place.
It's inside the perimeter of Atlanta.
Oh, no.
You live next to railroad tracks.
Ah, no, not the railroad tracks. I don't live in a dangerous neighborhood at all. So
you live next to the rich people.
I do. I live in such a yuppie area, but it's, quote, inner city. So, I mean, the fact that this is published in 1973, we've been having big civil rights movement. At this point, there have been riots in all the major cities. White people are having a huge moral panic about it. And it does feel like she's tapping into that.
She also tends to set a lot of her stories, at least for the series about Vicky, in Connecticut. And this also feels New England, though I don't think we know.
I think they mention a New England village, I think, is how they did. I don't think they named the state, but it's meant to be Connecticut or Massachusetts, something like that.
Somewhere extremely white.
Somewhere very white with season changes and picturesque little villages. So that screams New England to me.
Where people don't lock their doors.
Right, exactly, where people don't lock their door. Right. Yeah, that kind of place. So she does seem to be saying, like, oh, the danger is now even coming to the villages. It hasn't just stayed in the inner city, which to me, like, screams racial, whatever. But she doesn't come out and say it. But that's my take on that. So how would you describe the plot?
A mystical journey.
A mystical journey. That makes sense. So if you haven't read these books before, you've got a few main characters. It's mostly centered around a family. They are a very, how would you describe? Very scientific-based family.
They're the perfect American family, except intellectual.
Right.
So
yes.
You've got this family who lives out in the picturesque village. You've got a pair of aggressively neurotypical twins who have a vegetable garden and are good at things in school, but not too good.
Right.
You've got the misfit older daughter who is worried about her appearance and doesn't fit in well at school.
Wears glasses, the whole 9 yards.
Exactly. Which, as we all know from TV, makes you ugly.
Exactly, right. Take off those glasses, now you're a beauty queen. But yes.
Unless you're Sandra Bullock, in which case you need an entire warehouse of people to make you a beauty queen.
That's a good point.
Somehow,
because you're Sandra Bullock. Anyway, and then they have the youngest child, who to me reads as strongly autistic.
Yes.
Very strongly autistic, like a textbook.
I didn't know those words when I first read this, but reading it as an adult, it's like, okay, you've got the kid who's extremely smart, extremely good at particular things, doesn't get along well in school.
Doesn't get along well in school and was developmentally a little bit delayed. So he didn't start speaking on time, quote unquote. A lot of the villagers thought he was mute and therefore also stupid, dumb, etc. Because, people be like that. And
in the night, but thank God this isn't the inner city.
Thank God this isn't the inner city, right. But then he does start speaking, and he starts speaking in full sentences with long words and has all of this, intellectual curiosity and knowledge, and is well beyond that of a lot of adults, much less kindergartners. And there's a great little scene where he has started kindergarten, and the teacher goes around and asks each of the students something about themselves. Tell us something about yourself. She has some interesting inclusions in there. One of them, this little girl, we collected eggs because we have hens, blah, blah, blah. And then this one girl, I actually felt very uncomfortable reading this part because it felt so snobby to me. There's this one girl who obviously was held back in school, and she kind of talks with a lisp and, gives them this description of how we're made of skin and muscles and bones and stuff like that. And she's meant to be kind of stupid. That felt very uncomfortable to me. And then there's a boy who starts to give like a sex talk, but the teacher kind of cuts him short. Talks about how girls and boys are different. Boys have things that girls don't, and we didn't get any further than that. Not sure how he knew all that in kindergarten, but he really did. Wanted to talk about it. And then, of course, and the teacher's like, oh, we have a group of scientists in our school. Charles, why don't you tell us something about your own self? What are you interested in?
First of all, he has to say that he prefers to be called Charles Wallace.
Charles Wallace, not Charlie or Charles or whatever. And then he goes on a very sounding like it was ripped from the dictionary definition of mitochondria. And he goes into what we now know are actually just fictitious little thing about how the mitochondria worked. And the teacher, of course, doesn't know these words and tells him that he's lying.
Which is not really how you talk to kids in kindergarten.
It's not. I will say, as someone who was not a Charles Wallace, but was precocious in kindergarten, I did know adults like that.
Yeah.
Not my kindergarten teacher, but my third grade teacher was very much like that. So yeah, I knew some adults who would talk to children like that, and it's usually because they were very insecure about their own intelligence. But yeah, so he gets beaten up a lot because, of course, he doesn't fit in. And his older sister, Meg, the one who is, somewhat awkward and wears glasses and is very smart herself, but doesn't actually do very well in school and is good at math, which in the 70s was kind of, not cool for a girl. She's extremely protective of her brother. And she wants to make sure that the principal of the school, who she used to butt heads with herself, Mr. Jenkins. Did we ever learn his first name?
I don't think so.
I think he's just Mr. Jenkins throughout the entire thing. Mr. Jenkins is looking out for him, which he is not.
Of course not.
Of course not. And Mr. Jenkins is kind of described as this kind of middle age. You get the impression he is not married, does not have a family.
Does not have a life.
Does not have a life. He works as a principal, but he doesn't really like children. He had worked in, again, the inner city, but he couldn't handle it. And so he went to this village, and he's also not handling that very well.
So he was sent back from the high school to principaling the elementary school.
Right.
Which I guess is the adult version of being sent back in school,
maybe? Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, at least, and so my family are all teachers. In my experience, if you can't teach, you teach gym, or you become an administrator. That's the joke. And he is an administrator. So
he is.
That does fit with that line. But he's just kind of seen as someone not who's necessarily malevolent in any way, but just sort of inept.
And doesn't have a life.
And doesn't have a life, right.
Like, he doesn't have anything going on inside, really.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of those people who just doesn't seem to have hobbies. Like,
right.
The people who don't know what to do with themselves when they retire.
Exactly, right. Although, he obviously does read, like, the Wall Street Journal and other things, so it's not like he doesn't read or anything. But you do get the impression that maybe he's just reading them because it's kind of expected at that period of time.
Yeah, there's no, like, interest that you get.
I mean, if he were around now, he might listen to NPR in his car.
Yes, that's exactly what he would listen to.
Yeah.
Now, what he's going to do is not be helpful. So Meg goes to talk to him and complain about the fact that Charles Wallace is getting beaten up, which is a huge problem.
Right.
There's actually this incredibly funny thought she had, which is, like, what is the U.S. coming to when a child isn't safe in school? It's like, well, that didn't age well.
No, it didn't.
What is it coming to? What is it coming to, indeed?
What is it coming to? Yeah, we hadn't quite gotten to the school shooting part in our history yet.
But she was like, she's not even the inner city, because she has a lot of drive-bys on the inner city. But out here in her perfect village, Mr. Jenkins is very much like, well, he has to learn to adapt, Charles Wallace, and the law of the jungle. Which is not exactly how I think one should run a school. It's like if you thought the Lord of the Flies was a documentary and a suggestion book.
Right. I will say, I think I don't know about American, but my understanding of, like, British boys' schools is that they were often run on this thought.
I believe you're right.
Yeah, that, like, of course the bullying's going to take shape, but that makes you strong, and, that makes you tough, and you'll adjust, and
This is why the British Empire has widely been hailed as a good thing for the whole world.
Right, and people came out of that system very well adjusted, ready for life. So yeah, it did remind me a bit of that, and you get this idea with Mr. Jenkins. It's almost like he's a holdover from something like that. Like, he's a holdover, and as much as he talks about George Wallace needing to adapt, that he himself has not really adapted.
George Wallace is someone else.
Oh my God. we're talking about racial integration and the inner city, and George Wallace just came to mind like that.
I can see where that would come from.
Yeah, no, that's where the brain went. Charles Wallace, very different person, not a segregationist, to my knowledge. So you could see how he, even though he said that about Charles Wallace, that he himself had not really adapted to, life.
Although, interestingly, all the characters are actually in agreement that Charles Wallace has to learn to adapt.
That was weird to me, too, because you would think that maybe his mother, seeing him come home from school with literal black eyes,
like every day,
might herself call the school. Like, she's not portrayed as an uncaring mother, but that apparently doesn't occur to anybody. And in fact, Mr. Jenkins' meeting with Meg is like, if your parents were concerned, why aren't they here talking to me? And it's a good question. Why aren't they talking to him? Why is Meg the only one who seems concerned about this?
Yeah.
Anyway.
I also have questions.
Yeah, that seemed a little wild, and it's probably just a fact that, mid-20th century parenting was way more hands-off about things like that. So that's probably where that's coming from. But it also seems like this quasi-scientific based thought that if you're a little weird or off, you just sort of learn to adapt to society.
I think you're right on that,
Yeah.
which I don't love, but that's what everybody does.
That's what everyone does. So I guess that's descriptive, maybe not prescriptive, but it is descriptive of how things work.
I do want to talk about their parents for a second.
Yes.
The father is mostly absent. He's off doing important science things and is on, like, first name basis with the president.
Right.
I'm not totally sure what he does. I mean, in A Wrinkle in Time, he gets, like, kidnapped by aliens, but
Well, he's a physicist, right?
which is exactly the type of people that aliens kidnap. Yes.
I mean, yeah. So you get the impression the father is a little more head in the clouds, literally, maybe. Big into the writing equations on the literal kitchen tablecloth kind of situation. And the mom is also a scientist, but more of the biology, chemistry angle. So it's a little more down to earth. I don't know. Do you think that's accurate?
Sure. I mean, that's how people would see it.
That's how people would see it, yeah.
I mean, I don't have people tend to see physicists as being these incredibly smart people.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to think about Jack Parsons getting scammed by L. Ron Hubbard and going off and doing sex magic in the desert together to raise the Antichrist, which frankly sounds fun.
I don't know. You'd have to be willing to hang out around L. Ron Hubbard. I think I'll pass.
Yeah, like Jack Parsons, good at physics, not good at
regular life. I think that is the stereotype it's leaning into a bit. So the mother is this very idealized person. So she's able to be a mother to 4 children, all below 18. She makes dinner. She is a scientist, a very renowned scientist with a double PhD.
Making renowned discoveries of mitochondria in her kitchen.
Right. She has they have a lab in their house that was funded, I don't know, how? One doesn't know.
They talk about her, like, electron microscope.
Right.
Those aren't cheap, especially in the 70s. She doesn't seem to have any assistants.
Yeah, you never see assistants. You never see, underpaid or non-paid grad students working in the off hours in her lab, which would be more realistic.
She's a biologist. She's looking at slides. She needs someone to prepare her slides. I don't know what preparing slides means, but I didn't get beyond Bio 102. But
someone's got to be washing all that glass equipment.
Exactly. Science is a group project.
Right. It is not a solo. And I think some of that may just be this kind of American ideal of, the single person off to make these great discoveries, when in fact it doesn't, of course, work like that at all. As you said, it's a group project.
Yeah, it's like the modern day version of, the CEO started things in his garage and doesn't mention that the garage is of a house that has a good internet connection and it belongs to parents who can make $100K loans.
Exactly, right. So it had a little bit of that feel. She's also drop dead gorgeous. Gotta mention that. She has like auburn curls or something like that,
Which means she also, besides making dinner, is spending a lot of time on making her hair curl.
Yes, even though her husband is not there right now. So just putting that out there. Yeah, so she's, supposed to be this, like, very, very kind and also intelligent and beautiful and does these scientific discoveries and also gets dinner on the table because she's a good housewife, too. So it's a little weird. And then the family themselves, they're the type of people who, read all the time, are very scientifically inclined. Charles Wallace gets, Darwin read to him as a bedtime story, that kind of thing.
That would put me to sleep.
That's true. It might do the job. So that's the family, and they have this wonderful kind of bucolic setting with a dog, with a snake. We'll talk more about the snake.
It's a mystical snake.
It's a mystical snake with a garden that the twins, an organic garden,
Yes.
that the twins do themselves and have, of course, won awards for in the village for their cucumbers and whatnot. So that's the setting for the family. Another main character is Calvin.
Meg's perfect boyfriend.
And Calvin is kind of from the opposite type of family.
He's the wrong side of the tracks.
The
side you live on.
The side I live on, apparently.
The rich people live on the other side.
That's true. They do live on the other side. Okay, I guess I am on the wrong side. Perfectly nice anyway. So, but he lives on actually the wrong side of the tracks. It's strongly hinted that his family is probably Catholic because they're all redheaded and Irish.
I did not pick up on that. I didn't realize we were going to hate on the Irish.
We're going to hate on the Irish because Madeleine L'engle was herself very much a WASP and an Episcopalian. So
yes, we're going to hate on the Irish.
Yes. Big Irish redheaded Catholic family. So think the Weasleys from Harry Potter, only not a happy family.
Awesome. Perfect description.
So poor, but not lovable, not cuddly. Like the mom's just kind of very kind of mildly abusive to the kids. Everyone screams at each other all the time. There's a lot of invective and blah, blah, blah. And Calvin is, seen as this person who's kind of the diamond in the rough in children's literature, who comes from the hard family, but he himself is smart and he plays basketball and he's good at school and he, is going to succeed beyond his family.
He even pushes back on Meg's constant comments about the inner city.
He does. I liked that.
He points out that kids in the inner city would be more used to kids different from themselves, so they might be nicer to Charles Wallace.
Exactly, yes. I like Calvin. We like Calvin. Calvin's great.
We do. We agree. Calvin is the perfect boyfriend. We like Calvin.
Calvin's the perfect boyfriend. And Calvin, of course, really latches onto their family as kind of this substitute family in a way. And so that's the dynamic of the main characters. Now, the book begins with the fact that Charles Wallace had seen dragons in the garden.
Now, this is where it becomes much more sense-making to me that this is a companion rather than a sequel to A Wrinkle in Time, because in A Wrinkle in Time, Charles Wallace gets kidnapped by aliens, learns to walk through walls with the power of statistics, and then Meg frees him with, I think, the power of love.
Yes.
So after all that, you'd think that you hear there's dragons in the vegetable garden.
Why not?
But in this book,
we've talked to a literal brain. So
and it was mean.
And it was a mean brain. And we have been nursed back to health by these large fuzzy creatures who don't have the ability of sight. And we have gone on multiple planets. So you know what? Nothing should be a surprise.
But in this, the dragons are surprising, and Meg thinks that he's making them up.
Right, which it kind of feels like a throwback to if you've read your Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the throwback to Lucy, who of course they think might be lying about the wardrobe, and then the idea of like, well, if she's not a liar and she's not a madman, then maybe she's telling the truth.
That's so C.S. Lewis.
It's very aggressively C.S. Lewis. So Meg is having not quite that literal, but she's having the similar thoughts of like, well, Charles Wallace usually has a good grasp on reality, and he doesn't lie about things because, he's autistic, but we don't know that. And so, what could be happening here? Well, and they have this funny thing where they talk about dragon droppings, which apparently everyone knows about in this world. It was kind of funny.
Yeah, fumets.
Which apparently is a household name. But yeah, the things they think are dragon droppings are actually these little iridescent wings. Sounds really cool, actually. That fell off of the cherubim.
And the twins can identify it as not being from any sort of known type of birds because some feather words are wrong.
Yes.
Because even though the twins try to be rather aggressively neurotypical, and
they are rather smart, though.
Right.
So eventually, Meg herself sees the cherubim.
And it says, "Be not afraid."
And it says, "Be not afraid," because that's what angels say. The cherubim's a great character, though. I did like the cherubim.
I do like it. And he's a singular cherubim.
That's correct, yes.
Not a cherub.
Not a cherub. Thank you for correcting me. He is a delightful person. And the description of him is that it is basically like a wheel of wings with eyes on the wings. And what's interesting to me about the characterization is that they're not the same type of eyeball. They're different types of eyes.
So he can show you different eyes depending on how he's feeling.
Right. So, like, there's cat eyes and more human-like eyes and more snake eyes and all these different types of eyes. So it would be intense looking.
But fortunately, he says, be not afraid.
Fortunately, he says, be not afraid, so we can calm down.
Yeah. Whenever anyone says, don't be afraid, you're instantly just not afraid of it, right?
I think that's how that works, yeah.
That's how emotions work.
Yeah, that's how emotions work. To be fair, according to him, cherubim do not have feelings, so he wouldn't really know.
True.
He's doing the best he can.
That makes more sense. He's trying.
He's trying, yeah. He's doing the best he can. And he doesn't really know humans. His job before this had been to name the stars. And he reveals, in this universe, you have people who are namers and people who are teachers. He reveals that Meg is also a namer. And what a namer does is they are able to kind of see into someone's real self and really, truly see who they are and name them for who they really are. And a teacher is someone who guides namers and other people. So we also meet the teacher.
Blageny. And Blageny is going to explain why he's there, along with the snake, Louise.
Yes, because that's right. The snake, Louise, is not an ordinary snake.
She's also a teacher.
And she has a very friendly reaction to Blageny as well as the cherubim.
So that's how they know it's okay.
Yeah.
And we reveal that the central conflict of the book is that Charles Wallace is dying of mitochondritis, where his mitochondria are sick. Mm-hmm. And it's because of the ecthroi, who are mystical Greek thingamajigs, who are Xing things out of the universe. Like, there's been stars that magically vanish, and that's why physicist father has been off jetting, right, talking to the president.
And they make a scream when they die, which is a bit horrifying sounding.
It really is. We shouldn't have skipped past that because that was horrifying.
Yeah, anyway. No, there's the same night that they come across the cherubim and the teacher, and that, Louise reveals herself to be a teacher, they also have their first introduction to the ecthroi. And the ecthroi, it's kind of like this, it's connected to the brain that they meet, in A Wrinkle in Time. But it's this idea of something that wants to X everything, to make something into nothing. And they have this experience where they see someone who seems to be Mr. Jenkins, the principal. And then the Mr. Jenkins screams, flaps his arms like wings, and flies into the sky and makes a tear in the sky. Which, that's pretty horrific.
Yes, very.
Yeah. So now, one of the problems that we have is that we have these extra Mr. Jenkins running about.
Meg has to face her first challenge as a namer and figure out how to correctly name Mr. Jenkins, this guy she hates.
Right.
For fairly good reasons.
So she and the cherubim are doing this task together, but she's kind of the one who has to lead because she knows Mr. Jenkins, she knows the town, the cherubim is there for kind of moral support, but, he doesn't know how people work. So they actually kind of go back in time a day so that they can do this without kind of alerting other people, which I thought was kind of great. Just conveniently go back.
It is convenient.
It's very convenient. And so they go back to the morning before, and she and the cherubim, who can also make himself invisible, very convenient. Very convenient. They go down, instead of going to the high school, they take a bus and go to the elementary school. And even though they're there very early, there is already a Mr. Jenkins waiting for them, who looks completely like Mr. Jenkins with like partially balding and dandruff and, his suit and tie and, very boring, the man in the gray suit, middle-aged white man.
All the X-Ray are very good at impersonations. So.
Yes, they're all very good at impersonations. And so she's talking with him, and he seems to be pretty normal. And then another Mr. Jenkins pops up, identical looking. And then when she thinks she can't get more confused, there is a third Mr. Jenkins. So they speak of them as Mr. Jenkins A, B, and C. And her job, of course, is to figure out which one is the real Mr. Jenkins.
She also learns 2 superpowers here. First one is Kithing, which is super telepathy, where she can link with the cherubim and learn things about stuff. And he can connect her to her perfect memories. The second is the power of love, which, again, you'd think she would remember from A Wrinkle in Time, but I guess that hasn't really happened in this universe.
It's also possible that we humans are just really bad at learning things. And I'm okay with that.
That is true. Yeah.
I'm okay with that. That seems to be... That human history would indicate that might be just the problem.
I can see how you might have to learn the power of love multiple times.
Yeah.
Anyway, through Kithing, she remembers a good story about Mr. Jenkins buying nice shoes for
Calvin.
Calvin, yeah.
Yeah.
And this makes her love him, and then she can recognize the true Mr. Jenkins amongst the Mr. Jenkinses.
Right, because the false ones, they make a mistake in that one of them looks way too, like, overly helpful and also kind of, authoritarian helpful. And the other one is just, like, way too mean authoritarian, I guess you could say. Whereas the real Mr. Jenkins is pretty,
mediocrely mean.
Pretty mediocre. And not really, doesn't have that kind of power that these fake Mr. Jenkins have. So she's able to actually find love for the real Mr. Jenkins. Yay! Now the next thing that happens is where we get into Magic School Bus territory, because they have to go into the mitochondria in a cell in Charles Wallace.
Which is mystically connected to the universe in such a way that defeating the X-Ray here will defeat them, like killing stars and
Exactly, right. Everything's connected in kind of a mystical way.
It's very Yoda, like...
Yeah.
There's no difference between a leaf in this world.
Exactly.
There's no difference between a star and a mitochondria.
Right. And so they do a whole thing talking about how size doesn't matter.
Very Yoda.
Yes.
All you need is a puppet.
Exactly. Extremely Yoda. And then they actually meet the other main character, which is the shrimp-like creature.
I'm very offended that you called me a shrimp creature.
That's true. I shouldn't be doing that. So Sporos is the name, and powering up the mitochondria is his game, or at least it will be. And he is the made up part of mitochondria. So mitochondria obviously is the powerhouse of the cell, as we all learned in 3rd grade, and that is obviously real. Madeleine L'engle goes into some fiction here and says that what actually powers the mitochondria are, how would you say, farandoli?
Sure.
We'll go with that because this is a made-up term and we don't know how to say it. Farandoli. And they are these creatures that kind of look like shrimp, although they don't want to be called that.
Only in juvenile form, though.
Only in juvenile form. And once they are able to, quote, deepen, then they turn more into like a tree, would you say?
Yeah, like a kelp thing.
Like a kelp thing, yeah. So it's almost like they become like the kelp or the algae that provides the oxygen for the mitochondria so that it can work. Is that, you think, a good description of how that works in this made up environment? And the problem in Charles' mitochondria is that there are ecthroi in there who are confusing the farandoli, who are making them decide that they do not want to deepen and that they want to dance and that they are smarter than, the deepened farandoli. and that they want to kind of do their own thing.
Now, here is where, like, it does get more C.S. Lewis to me.
A little, yeah.
First of all, I don't see what the problem is with dancing and being mobile generally.
Being mobile is pretty great. Although there is a great line, and I meant to write it down so I could have it, where it was something to the degree of, you can't really move unless you're rooted, kind of thing, which is kind of a good line.
It is. I'll look it up and have it.
Yeah. So that's a good line. And so the idea is that the Farandoli, Sporos, along with some of his fellows, his mates,
his
pals,
chums,
his chums, feel like chums. They want to simply join in this dance. Now, our heroes in the mitochondria are somewhat handicapped because they cannot move and they cannot speak to each other using regular speech. What they can do is kithe.
And here is where they bring along Mr. Jenkins for reasons, and he's really struggling with the kithing.
Mr. Jenkins is older. You know what? I didn't feel this way when I was a child reading it. I identified, of course, with Meg. But now as an adult, I kind of identify with Mr. Jenkins. Like, you're kind of old, you're tired, you don't want to learn new things. And he has this great line where he talks about how he feels like he just goes from his house to his car to his work to his car to his work. And I felt very attacked by that.
Yeah. One of the best things that's ever happened to me is remote work, because I don't go from my car to my work because I just don't go places.
Well, yeah. But yeah, so he was talking about how they were trying to talk to him about walking in the woods and how you feel communing with the trees. And poor Mr. Jenkins has not walked in woods for a long time because he's an adult with a boring life and he's mostly just in his car or in his home or at his workplace. And I think way too many of us can relate to that.
I have not walked in woods communing with trees for a while.
Yeah, it's been a minute. It's been a hot minute. So they have to kind of remind Mr. Jenkins about how that kind of communication works because he also doesn't have, like a life partner. And you could think that you could relate to it that way. So like Meg and Calvin are over here. They're in love. They're kithing very naturally because they're in love and they're communing with each other. And poor Mr. Jenkins doesn't have that kind of ability. But once he does get it, he finally, is kind of able to mush along. There's also a bit that I found nice where it talks about kind of communicating with people on their level. So like Calvin kithes numbers at Meg. And that's really helpful for her because she's so good at math. And so she's able to kind of hold on to the numbers, in a way of like tethering herself to reality. Can't relate personally, but you're more of a numbers person. Maybe that spoke to you.
Not really. I don't have any connection to just numbers by themselves.
You don't have an emotional connection to the square root of, 300 or something?
I don't. There are some numbers I might say are better than others. Like 36 is clearly better than 37 in some sort of emotional sense. But
interesting.
But as far as just if you said numbers to me, like detached from anything else, like
right.
It's sort of if you just said words to me, like detached from anything else.
There's no context, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but that apparently helps her. They're able to finally convince Sporos that he needs to deepen. And I think he even says it's deepening time.
Which I sort of envision as a Power Rangers thing.
It was very Power Rangers-esque when he does that. So it's deepening time. He decides to, that he's going to do this. And we also get these little mystical visions of Charles Wallace as they're doing that because Charles Wallace had been feeling kind of sick. He'd been feeling like maybe he had the flu, but that escalates real fast. And he is now bedridden with the family doctor, like getting him oxygen. And he is in a very bad way. And then all of a sudden, the Ecthoi are defeated. The Sporos and his chums are deepening. And now he is on the way to health.
Now, our poor cherubim, though. Because our cherubim has to save everyone, and especially Mr. Jenkins. Mr. Jenkins finally got through to Sporos and was like, deep in.
Yeah.
And then the Ecthroi came to kill Mr. Jenkins.
That's right.
And then somehow, like, Prognoskes, the cherubim, had to kill himself to save everyone.
Right. He sacrificed himself. And I will say, so, Madeleine L'engle, she's kind of a eccentric Christian because Episcopalian, but she's still a good Christian, so we got to have some self-sacrifice in there, right?
Yep.
So the cherubim self-sacrifices, and which is different from just being X'd. You're choosing to, to help other people.
You're still a part of creation.
You're still a part of creation. And because he made that self-sacrifice, Mr. Jenkins is saved, and therefore Charles Wallace is saved.
And everything is good. Charles Wallace is recovered. He's going to work on adapting. Mr. Jenkins is going to try to do something about bullying at the school, which
Yay.
Apparently it takes a mystical journey through mitochondria for him to realize that...
It's a problem.
Yeah. Some people learn quicker than others.
Yeah, although I will say again, to me that does feel kind of realistic to human nature. We're slow learners.
We are.
Kind of stupid.
Especially as we get older, we learn slower.
Yeah, I feel like that kind of had him nailed to rights, middle-aged white man. That's pretty on point.
It's what they're like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty on point. Although again, as we learn, not necessarily a bad guy, just sort of slow and frankly probably suffering from clinical depression.
Yeah, and
I got those vibes.
Yeah, it is the 70s.
And it's the 70s, so we're not going to say that.
Nor will we give him drugs for it.
No, he is not going to get therapy, although he desperately needs it.
Yeah.
None of that's going to happen.
At most, he's going to take a walk in the woods, and we're going to pretend like that's therapy.
Right. Although that probably would help.
Yeah.
It wouldn't hurt.
Not going to hurt.
No, not going to hurt.
I have nothing bad to say about walks in the woods. I don't do it. But,
As we've established, you and I are anti-nature people.
It's full of bugs.
It's full of bugs. I will say, the times when I've been able to be in nature, when it was not like a tropical, moist, nasty wetland, which is basically what we live in, it has been kind of delightful. I like walking in snow.
Ugh.
Well, you got to have decent boots. But as long as you got decent boots, I like walking in snow. It's very quiet. Noises are muffled. It's
that would
pretty.
Be nice.
The trees have little icicles hanging from them. I miss snow a lot. I like snow. I do also like being in the ocean.
I like ocean.
Ocean's great.
Don't go too deep.
Don't go too deep. I'm a pretty good swimmer, but also, don't go too deep.
It's not about your swimming ability. The ocean is full of horrifying things.
It is full of horrifying things.
But they can't come in the shallows most of the time.
Well, sharks come in fairly shallow water.
I am going to pretend you didn't say that.
Sorry to burst your bubble. More shallow than I'll go up to, here or whatever. But anyway. But yeah, the wetland, marshy, hot nature, gross, disgusting.
Yeah.
But they're in New England.
Yeah.
So it's a less buggy nature.
That is true. It's easier to find.
Their idea of walking in the woods does not involve showering in off spray before you do that.
I bet they don't even check themselves for ticks afterwards.
They would have ticks up there, actually.
Oh, they do?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because so my ex and his family were from Pennsylvania, which is a little farther south, but they actually have a pretty big tick problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they would have to check for ticks, but not as many mosquitoes probably. Not as many creepy crawlies, which is my main problem with nature.
Yeah. So are we yay or nay for walking in the woods?
I am yay walking in temperate deciduous forests that are cold. I am nay walking in other types of woods.
I like going on horseback rides through the woods.
Oh.
Because, first of all, the horse is going to encounter the spiders before I do.
Right. I can see that. See, my problem with that is you have a horse involved who can kill you. But
they're more scared of you than you are of the...
You say that, but a horse can throw me and make me paralyzed from the neck down forever.
That's true. That's why you wear a helmet.
I'm just saying, I don't know.
That's fair.
I don't mess with horses.
I
I'm
respect
not about that.
Okay, so back to the book. I think the time has come to rate this on my unitless sugar scale.
Yes.
So the S stands for sexiness. Now, obviously, this is our sexiest episode to date because of this outfit, which do you not want to mate with me?
Everyone should want to mate with you based on the outfit alone.
Exactly.
I mean, that's what you want to see in the club.
Right?
In fact, I will go to a club if it involves you wearing that outfit along with me at the club. That sounds amazing.
I don't club, but we'll keep that in mind.
Keep that in mind. That would make me want to go to a club. Anyway, so yeah, in spite of her obviously sexy outfit, I would not rate this book as very sexy because it's a children's book.
It really is. A lot of times I do sweetness instead of sexiness, but I am wearing a shrimp outfit today.
Yeah, you are wearing a shrimp outfit. It is sweet, I would say. It's a sweet book overall.
Meg has a perfect boyfriend.
Meg has a perfect boyfriend, but they're very much not into like the sexy times other than like hand holding and that kind of thing.
It's a children's book.
It's a children's book, right.
Apparently, we assume that Meg's parents have a good relationship, but we don't really know because their father is never around.
Right.
Which probably makes it easier to have a good relationship.
That might be the secret.
So moving on. It's kind of sweet. I'm very sexy.
You're very sexy, obviously.
Uniqueness.
I would rate it high on the uniqueness scale.
Same.
And most of her books, at least, I don't love the Vicky books.
Same.
Talk about that another time. But these, the ones that involve the Murrays, which is the family, these are unique. They have this kind of, I don't want to say syncretic, but kind of syncretic, religious / sci-fi / fantasy thing going on.
It's like what C.S. Lewis would have written if he weren't obnoxious about it. Like
C.S. Lewis wanted to write that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Instead, he just like beats you over the head with a bat-labeled Christian allegory.
Exactly. Right. I like some C.S. Lewis, but he had some issues. Anyway, yeah, this is what he wanted to write, except that he wasn't as much into sci-fi. And yeah, it's got sci-fi, it's got religion, it's got in a weird way politics, kind of sorta, you know, inner city scares. It's got some fantasy elements, I think we can say.
Yeah. I mean, I'm into it. I loved these books growing up.
Oh yeah, I was a big fan. I didn't love Many Waters, but I think you did, actually.
I actually really liked Many Waters, and I know that's a minority opinion.
Yeah.
I was also really into biblical fanfic for a bit.
Okay. Well, that one is, if you want to try it out, it is basically Bible fanfic involving the twins, who are only side characters in this one, in a retelling of the Noah flood.
And it's much sexier.
Oh, that is true.
Because everybody is super into the twins.
Yes, they are hot commodities, apparently. Yeah, that one is, and that one I feel like is somewhat for a little older readers too.
I can see that.
That was my
Definitely.
read on that. So yeah, uniqueness, top marks for that.
Gender. So we have an idealized housewife, and we've got Meg, she's good at math, which is a little odd for like how one would normally write girls at this time.
Mm-hmm.
But she's also sort of the mystical hero.
Right. Meg, I can't remember her name because I'm not very much on my Star Wars mythology, but I feel like Meg is sort of like the newer Star Wars female character. Help me.
Rey.
Yes. Meg reminds me of Rey.
I can see that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like she's clearly kind of the mystical hero. I remember as a kid, I really appreciated the portrayal of Meg.
Yeah.
Who is a girl, but not super girly. But not like, she doesn't strike me as like, oh, I'm not like other girls. She's not really like that.
she wants to like fit in and have friends, and she's got a
Mm-hmm.
boyfriend, so she's still kind of like the other girls.
Right. But she's smart, but not like the right kind of smart. Um, and she's got depth. She's got a personality.
Yeah,
I like Meg. I have feelings about the portrayal of her mother, but it's the 70s. What are you gonna do?
exactly. They also have a female doctor, Dr.
That's
Louise,
true. We didn't
which
really talk about, but yeah, Dr. Louise is a female doctor who is just portrayed as very kind of nonchalantly, oh, she's a woman, but she's also a doctor, and it's not really a big deal.
and I remember my mom telling me once how hard it was for her to find a female doctor. Like she couldn't.
Right.
Her OB-GYN, like
Mm-hmm.
she couldn't find a female OB-GYN.
Yeah, yeah, and so that Dr. Louise is a family doctor, but yeah, it can be hard to find female doctors like female OBGYNs. So yeah, kudos to the portrayal of Dr. Louise.
I'm into it. Also, we have some toxic men on a redemption journey, by which I mean Mr. Jenkins.
Sure.
We learn that he's not just an empty, hollow man. He's
Right.
actually got depth, and we learn to love him. And
Mhm.
because he actually does better. Like he's going to do
He
things
does actually
to
do
address.
better. And unlike some toxic man journeys, he's not literally like raping people as part of his personal journey.
Yeah, why does
But
that have to be part of the toxic man journey?
something Buffy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, we don't have that kind of thing happening. Obviously, it's a children's book, but yeah, I would say it's this kind of more gentle toxic man, redemption arc.
Which I like. Redemption arcs are not easy to do well, and I think
No.
we really took an unpleasant principle. Like, I feel like we're all sort of primed to dislike school principals.
Right.
And so we take that person, make him stereotypical, and then give him depth and have him do good things and learn to do better.
Right. And not become perfect.
Right. He's still
like a school principal. He's
Yeah.
not a perfect person, but he's doing better.
he still needs some therapy.
He still needs therapy, but he's on the road.
He is, and I like that.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be a complete redemption arc,
No,
But-
because that's not realistic either.
but he started.
The whole plot takes place over a matter of 72 hours. I mean, it's pretty.
It's something like that.
Yeah,
it's fast.
pretty fast. Yeah.
All right, Exinus. So Franz Kafka, of course, says that a book should be an axe for the frozen sea inside us, which I feel like is even more profound coming from a shrimp.
Are you worried about axes right now?
Under my frozen sea, yes. Like, what if I got axed?
Don't hack too hard at the frozen sea. You might kill the shrimp.
Which would already be dead because I don't think they can live in freezing temperatures.
Oh, that's a good point. See, I wouldn't know that. I feel like you have to judge children's books on this a little differently, obviously.
Right.
When I was a kid, this did kind of have axiness for me.
Same.
It was an axe for the frozen sea in my mind. It did really affect me. I thought it was great, and it put a big impact on me, enough that I have remembered the title,
I still
over
have
2 decades later.
I have a copy of it.
Right.
Like, never got rid of my copy. Like, this is from my childhood,
Oh, that's awesome.
which is why it's sort of beat up.
Right, which is why literally coming apart. So it was a well-loved book.
Yeah, I was so into the mystical journey thing.
I
as
was
a
too.
child.
Yeah, no, this was a great, if you have a kid in your life who is also a little odd, who likes mystical journeys, I would recommend this.
It's good for weird kids.
It's good for weird kids, yeah.
Finally, readability.
It's very readable.
It's also very short. There's a lot happening, but it's all pretty digestible. It's hard for me to move my head in this thing. This copy is like 210 pages, so it's short, but it's pretty easy to follow.
Yeah, and I think one thing that Madeleine L'engle is really good at, and you mentioned this with dimensionality, she really is good at taking very complicated adult topics. I don't mean, a sexy adult, just like, complicated scientific topics, and explaining them in a way that a child can understand.
Again, I said this before, say it again, Wrinkle in Time, the ant and the piece of fabric and
Yep.
explaining fifth dimensions.
Yeah.
Totally got it right there.
Yeah, classic. My dad was a teacher, not of little children, but of teenagers. He always said if you really understand something, you can explain it to a child. And if you can't, then that's a sign that you don't quite understand it.
There's been a few things that I've realized I don't understand when somebody asks me to explain it.
Exactly. Yeah, no, if you're trying to explain it, especially to someone who is new to the topic or a literal child, you will suddenly learn just how ignorant you are about many things.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us today, Caroline.
Yes.
Is there anything you would like to exhort our readers to do?
Check out Madeleine L'engle. Don't check out Meet the Austins. Terrible book. Ugh.
Don't read about the Austins.
No, the Austins are terrible people. But do check out A Wrinkle in Time and A Wind in the Door and even Many Waters. Oh, and A Swiftly Tilting Planet. That's the other one. I did like that one too.
That's good.
That one's a good one.
Opinions are mixed on Many Waters. I think I'm in the minority for liking it, but
some people do.
Yeah.
Maybe you too have a shrimp costume, and maybe you too would like Many Waters.
So yes, go don your sexiest shrimp outfit. Read Many Waters.
Yeah.